our slides, a very quick and small task that we can work on what actually we would do if we started a literature review. Yeah, so inshallah we're going to start with that. Before I go and dive into the topics or the things that I'm going to be talking about during this small, I would say, introduction to literature review and how to do one, I just wanted to remind you guys why this is important, and how we can, صراحة, in these beautiful days of Ramadan and the last 10 days of Ramadan as well, how this can be implemented in a very good way. So first of all, إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى. So make sure you just keep your niyyah always خالصة لله. Whatever you do, you don't want to miss out on the ajr. Even when you do a research, just know it's always better to have a niyyah that is to better the health of a person, to better the health system, to better the healthcare within an Islamic state, whatever. And of course, the beautiful words of Imam Shafi'i when he said that لا أعلم علما بعد الحلال والحرام أنبل من الطب إلا أن أهل الكتاب قد غلبون عليه. This is a very nice quote, both telling us how beautiful medicine is and how highly regarded it was between the ulama, mainly Imam Shafi'i, and the fact that غلبون أهل الكتاب إليه. This till this day is true, to be honest, and partly it's because of these research things that we talk about. When you go see the newest research, the most cutting and most highly regarded research across the countries and the things that we follow is usually the American guidelines, the British guidelines, the French guidelines, the Australian guidelines. It's always like the Western guidelines. So with this research, with us doing research, honestly, it has us or puts our name on the table and picks up our name, and that could be something you can have a niyyah to achieve. So I wanted just to keep that in mind when we started talking about research in general. Okay, next slide. So I have to keep moving it because I'm going to keep losing my track. Okay, so our point of discussion today is, we want to know what is a literature review. The word literature review is a general word, and there's so many things that are something review. So literature review, narrative review, mini review, systematic review. Okay, what's the difference between them? Inshallah, we're going to be talking about it in its own slide. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of literature reviews, why you should do a literature review. And this is going to be, again, if anyone doesn't know me, I'm a very opinionated person. So I like to put my opinion in things, especially in things that I see around the university happening. You see my face a lot in the university, and I see a lot of what's happening around the uni students, and they do talk to me, they do ask me for advice, and you genuinely give them advice when they come to me. But now that I have a lecture, I also would like to advise you and everyone about why a literature review is better suited than someone, for example, who's trying to do me a random clinical trial when they're like a year 3 or a year 4. Again, we're going to talk about why that is not sufficient and why a literature review is much better. We're going to also run down about the main steps of a literature review. Alhamdulillah, I've done a lot of literature reviews in my time, and I've led a lot of them as well. And I've realized that they pretty much divide into 3 steps, which is you collect, then you kind of tablize. Okay, I know this is not a real word, but you can imagine when we make tables, so tablize, and then write. Simple 3 words: collect, tablize, and then write. Then next section will be about team dynamics and some tips to you guys. This section is not limited to literature review, but it is good for research in general. So this is why I hope everyone will just focus on this point that I'll be talking about. A lot of the problems usually is not, Rashid, we did this or that research. It's usually, we did the research, team does not work well, what's happening, what's wrong. Like, I would say, I would run down on my mind at a number of 70% of researches that I've been through or have seen being done has broken down throughout the time that it's been done. So, like, for example, if you've put yourself in like 5 different research, 3 of them will eventually not work out and not get published 2 of which will most probably, hopefully, get published. And of course, that publishing stage also is a very big leap or like jump for someone to reach. And usually the main reason this occurs is because of the team dynamics that go totally wrong. And of course, miscommunication. This is the number one cause of a lot of things. And communication is very important, not just for research. You are becoming doctors eventually, and you're going to be communicating a lot. And you can ask me as a resident, you're going to be communicating a lot. Of course, I did not introduce myself. I always forget to introduce myself because I always think people know me because of how much time I spend in the university. I'm Rashid. I'm an R1 resident in Jalil Hospital, a general pediatric resident currently. And yeah, that's just the introduction. And finally, we're going to have some questions, guys. Inshallah, we're going to be having you ask me questions if you want. And after the questions, we're going to do our small activity. So again, I have to move this. I keep having it in the way. So type of literature reviews. So in general, when we see the word review in a research, what does it mean? So literature review is an umbrella term for multiple words. Mainly the two I want you to focus on is narrative review and mini review. So narrative review is the simple review that you see. What is it exactly? It's simply me grabbing information about a certain topic or a certain title and talking about it. So for example, I want to make a review talking about the correlation between pregnant females and iron supplements. What is the correlation here? I just want to know what it is. So you can think about it. Honestly, the closest thing I always mention it being close to is an essay, like an essay you write in the school, where you search about something and you write what you found in your search. So, for example, I went to Wikipedia, I saw that, and I went to, for example, Google, and I asked ChatGPT, and I saw that. Of course, narrative review is an upgrade from that, where you're not going to be using Wikipedia and ChatGPT. You're going to be using actual research that is found in PubMed and Scopix on multiple other databases as well. The next one is mini review. Now, mini review is simply the same as narrative review. Honestly, it's very subjective. When do we call something as a narrative review and when do we call something as mini review? But mini review is just a very quick rundown of like 5 to 7 researches about the topic. In mini review, you're not searching the whole literature. So what does a literature mean and what does a whole literature mean? The topic about the pregnant female and them taking iron supplements. There would be, for example, let's say an example of 150 researchers that talks about this topic. Some of them, they talk about how many females are taking iron supplements. Some of them talking about how many females are not taking iron supplements. Some of them comparing different iron supplements. Some of them talking about the side effects of the iron supplements. There's different research talking about different things about iron supplements in or being taken by pregnant females. Yeah, that would be a total of 150. If you're going to be writing a review, a literature review, you should at least get all the 150 into your research, right? Unless your topic is very specific. Like, for example, I want to write about pregnant female and iron supplements, but I just want to know the side effects. That's it. So all I'm going to be focusing on is like on that 20 researches that talk about the side effects of iron supplements in pregnant female when they take it during pregnancy. Okay, this is a literature review. A mini review would look like me talking about only 3 to 4 of the most prominent research in that topic. So that's a mini review. Yeah. These are simply the differences. Narrative review and literature review are pretty interchangeable as words go. Literature review, again, is the umbrella. If you're going to be actually specific, literature review is just simply the umbrella term for narrative review, mini review, review in general. Okay. But again, this is the idea. You're just reviewing, you're reading the literature or like the work. Literature just simply means the work that has been done or the publication that has been done on certain matters. So a literature about pregnancy with iron supplement is simply the publications that has been done talking about these two things together. Okay. Next is systematic review and meta-analysis. This section is not under literature review. Why? Because this is an original research. So it's not meta-analysis is an original research. Systematic review is not really an original research. It actually should be fitted into the literature review section. But the main difference between a literature review, a normal literature review, and a systematic review from the word is a systematic approach has been talked about in the methodology. This is the main difference between them. What do I mean by that? Again, I go back to the 150 research example that I had. So I had 150 researches talking about pregnancy and iron deficiency, iron supplements. Okay. When I do a systematic review, I'm going to talk specifically how I extracted the 150 research. And then from those 150, how did I exclude the ones that I did not add into my review? In which, if someone took my methodology and read the methodology and replicated my methodology, they will get exactly the same articles that I have gotten. This is how strict the methodology is in systematic review. Okay? So again, it's just the simple idea that systematic review is a stricter methodology than literature and mini reviews, or narrative reviews and mini reviews. That's simply what it is. Systematic review can then be upgraded to a meta-analysis where you will then get the results of the systematic reviews or the numbers you get from a systematic review and pull out your own extrapolated number. So, for example, a research, or like you pulled out 10 researches in your systematic review talking about complications of iron supplements. The first research said that 50% of females there get constipation. The next one said 40%. The third one said 10%. The fourth one said, etc., whatever. Your meta-analysis will get these numbers, and then you will give us a final number. And the final number out of all these 10 researches is 33% of females who take iron supplements get constipation. This becomes an original research. So what is an original research? It's simply a research where you put a finding out there. For example, in RCT, a random clinical trial is an original research. A cross-sectional research that you're doing in CBR, this is an original research. Meta-analysis as well, because in the end, you're finding a result and you're talking about it out there. Review, the problem with reviews in general is they're not original researches. Why? Is because you're just extrapolating the results that has already been said in the literature and you're just summarizing it in a big page or in a big paper. So this can open up the idea of what are the cons and the pros of doing a review. So pros does not require data. This is so good because you're not in need to do a questionnaire. You don't need to run behind data from the hospital, look at the system, start extrapolating data from the system, and you don't need volunteers. This is something I think people who went through CBR know how bad this can be sometimes. It can be started whenever and is not limited except to your imagination. And this is actually something I'll be talking about later on in one of the researches that I very proudly published. It's literally your imagination that limits what you want to publish when it comes to a literature review. It's just what you think of 2 things or 3 things that relate and just do a review about it, and that's pretty much what you can do. It takes shorter time to finish. In general, if we're going to talk about all the researches that can be done, literature reviews are one of the easier ones. Systematic meta-analysis are one of the ones that take longer. Case reports are also one of the ones that take shorter time. Doctors usually like students who do these type of articles. Honestly, I've always seen that doctors, because it doesn't need volunteers and questionnaires and it doesn't need data analysis, doctors like students who do literature reviews. I've honestly always went to doctors to do some research with them, and they've always suggested literature reviews because it's very easy for them to manage as well as for us to do. It gets cited a lot. Now, this is not very important for a medical student. You getting citations Q1, Q2, طبعا in the tips and the question, the idea. Oh, it's correct. Okay, they started. Okay, no problem. But in the realm of citation, it's not really important for you as much as it is for a doctor, a PhD doctor. Q1, Q2 Hissawalif, I've been hearing a lot of people talking about it. I honestly don't know why or you guys as medical students, even me as a resident, would think of such of things. Honestly, just now do we start talking about Q1, Q2 as residents, now that we're thinking of publishing RTTs, case reports, things that will be seen by the general public or by other hospitals. But as medical students, again, your work could be good, but this should be taken care of. These things should be taken care of by a doctor, by a PhD doctor, not by you. You're any miskin في الأخير. You should just get the research done. Okay. So generally easy to navigate through, no data analysis or waiting for results. Again, I just told you it's 3 steps. That's all you have to do. Does not need a big team and can also fit a big team if needed. So you can do it. Honestly, you can do reviews on your own, or you can fit actually a big team into it and divide the work accordingly. The cons, of course, it needs a lot of writing, needs good English, to be honest. It needs a lot of reading. I'm not the type of person who likes to read a lot, honestly, but it needs a lot of reading, needs a lot of collection of articles. Now with the AI tools, honestly, it becomes much better. You get summarized ideas of the articles you sent onto such and such AI tool. But the problem with it is, again, it needs a lot of reading and it needs a lot of information. So you wouldn't usually do reviews on things that you have zero knowledge about. You should kind of know some things about it and then do a review about it. Of course, it's not counted as a publication in MBRU residency/internship. This is something I've discussed about when I did my residency, my residency in UAE lecture. Literature review, for some reason, MBRU does not accept it. طبعا MBRU is the Dubai branch of residency. Honestly, it's the best branch. Of course, not biased because I'm there. But again, this is not a big deal. Why? Because the idea here with literature review is it is something that you can stack your CV with. To suffice the MBRU requirement, pretty much all you need is like a single research in PubMed, and always I suggest to have it as a case report because that's like the one thing that's easier than a literature review. Of course, it needs professional presence. This is very subjective, and I'm going to show you in my research how this is subjective. But the problem with this is it can limit your publication if it's not done accordingly, and I'll talk about it in the next slide. So, why I love literature reviews, of course, not biased. Alhamdulillah, I was able to publish 4 different literature reviews. These 2 are my PubMed indexed literature reviews, recent updates on Kafistool and Kahul on cancer. This was published in, I think, 2023. So, like that's when I was year 4. It was my first publication. It was my first introduction to literature review. You can see actually the names of Dr. Hiba, Dr. Iman, Dr. Wasim. They're all with me and in this research. I've learned from them how to do a literature review. It was honestly a very good experience. If you can see here, there is professional names: Dr. Hiba, Wasim, and Iman. They're all people who are indulged in this. They know a lot about this topic اللي هي Kahul and Kafistool, which are just simply coffee products against cancer lines. And they're actually doing these, these clinical trials in their own labs. So they had the knowledge about doing this review, and they had us in their team when we wrote it out. So simply here we just wrote what the current literature said. Why? 1, it helped them to know what to do in their own labs. 2, it helped them get citations. I remember this was talked about it when they mentioned it, and we did get a lot of citations. I think I don't remember the number, I pretty much know it's either above 15 or above 20 citations, which is a huge amount of citations. Yeah. Again, this is the advantage of reviews in general. The second one is euthyroid graves of ophthalmopathy with negative antibodies. We named it EGONA, a comprehensive case-based review. So again, this is another word of review, but again, simply this is a literature review. Here, this is a research that I recently published just in 2020, in the end of 2025, in December of 2025. I led this research after getting the experience of knowing how to do a literature review. And the reason I'm proud of this research is because this is the one that I opened my imagination to. So the simple story of this, and I would love everyone to take this as an example when thinking about an idea of a review, is I did a case report about this specific topic where a person came to us to the hospital with ophthalmoplegia, or in general, what was it called? Exophthalmosis, without any positive thyroid functions or any of the antibodies that you'd see in a Graves' disease. Literally everything was negative. The only way we could diagnose it is by a CT, and then we had the ophthalmologist to see the CT, and they told us that this is looking like exophthalmosis. And actually, the patient later on got better with the treatment that we usually treat Graves' ophthalmopathy with, which is steroids. This was a case report that I've done and published, and then I was like, you know what? now that I did a case report about it, the topic is actually very interesting. Why don't I do a review about all the cases that has been talked about, that has talked about this specific topic? And I did that, and I'm going to run down exactly how I thought of doing it by moving through the steps that I showed you here: collect, stabilize, and write, and how we implemented these 3 steps in our research in this regard, and how it worked out very well and very smoothly, alhamdulillah. So yeah, this is again where the imagination just goes up. Again, it's not something, I didn't go to La La Land to do a review, and this is not what I meant by imagination. But a peak interest in a single research that I've done as a case report made me do it as a review. طبعا, I actually got this how do I say it? This idea from another review where I saw a case reported review done. I know this doesn't sound Englishy proper in an English term, but what happened was I was doing a review about Killian diverticulum. We're still in the works in it. Killian diverticulum is a very rare form of Killian. Is a rare form of diverticulum. Of course, it's the sister or the brother of Zinker diverticulum, the one that we take in year 2. Killian diverticulum, we're doing a review about it. When I read the literature, there's someone who did a similar thing to this, which is they reviewed all the case reports about Killian diverticulum, and I actually did follow this as a baseline for me to know how to do my review. And this is, by the way, put everything aside, this is a very important tip in doing any research. Please always have 1 or 2 papers that is an example of how your outline of the research will look like. And this is very important in whatever you do. If you do a case report, find a case report that is an outline for your work. If you're doing a review, same thing. Make an outline, get a research that puts the outlines of how your research will look like. My outline for my second paper, which is this one, actually it's wrong, which is this one, actually let me put laser ahsan, okay, which is this one, was that research that I've done. Sorry, which was that Killian research that has done the same thing, which is doing a case report review, which is they brought all the case reports together and they made a review. And honestly, this is a very nice idea to do. Like, find a case report bundle and make a review about it. That's a very nice idea to do, and this is what I did here exactly. Okay. Of course, guys, if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt me. And yeah, these are 2 other researches I've done. These are not PubMed indexed. They're not Q1 and Q2, and I don't know what everyone is saying, but they're not the best publications. They're not the most highest regarded publications, but I have easily put them in my CV when I applied here in the UAE, when I applied to the US, and they've all been accepted. But again, the idea here is you shouldn't be limiting yourself to Q1, Q2, PubMed. Again, for sure, if you can get PubMed index, get it. But if you're trying once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and the publication is not working out, most probably the topic is weak, the work is not done properly. Khalas, you want to get a publication, get it into one of these publishers that don't require that much of a strength in the paper. But again, here, and also in this example right here, as you can see, there was no professional person. It was just a bunch of medical students and an intern. Back then I was a medical student as well in 2024. The idea here is simple. If you want to publish a review in a good and respected journal, you need to do it. Most of the time they ask you for a professional person to be within the names of the publishing people. Most probably, or someone of experience or someone of that specialty has read it. For example, in my Zinker diverticulum review, I'm trying to involve Dr. Ali Shorbaj because he is a gastroenterologist who knows about the topic. Initially, we started without him, but now that we've heard feedback that we need professional people within the review that we do, we added them. But again, it's a stroke of luck where you send it and they will ask for it or not. For example, I was able to get it into PubMed, but they did not ask for a professional doctor to be within the topic of Igona, the review that I've done. But of course, if they did, most probably I would have went to an endocrinologist and talked about the review that I have done and showed him the work, and then he could have given me some advice, and then we could have published it together. But that's simply the problem that we may face when we're doing a review in general. So, what are the 3 main steps in a literature review? Simply here, the 3 steps are to collect, to stabilize, and to write. So, when I collect, what am I doing exactly? I'm finding relevant articles, collect as many as I can, and then I'll start excluding Of course, this I will make it as a graph, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. Know what you are reading about and start thinking of the second step, which is to tablize. Okay, and I'll talk about the tablize is the most important part, but to end the idea of collection. In collection, you need to remember exactly how you collected your article, because in the methodology, yes, it's not as strict as systematic review, but again, you have to be a bit clear of how you collected your data. So if you go up and if you go and search any literature review right now, they will write in their methodology, for example, we use the keywords kada and kada. So for example, in our example of the pregnant females taking iron supplements, the keywords are what? Pregnant, pregnancy, iron supplements, okay, iron deficiency anemia, maybe because they're taking iron supplements most probably for the iron deficiency anemia. Okay, these are the keywords that I've searched. Okay, I limited it to only, for example, RCTs and what's it called? RCTs and retrospective studies, for example. And using these keywords, I've searched it in PubMed. I put the selection of just having RCTs, and then I've seen all the papers. I've extracted all the papers. For example, I got 150 papers. After reading through the 150, we excluded 100 of them because they were not in relation to the topic that we want to talk about. We were left with 50. Out of the 50, only 20 were within the range of the time that we wanted it. For example, the range of the publication we wanted it was from 2000 to 2026. So we're left with 20 papers, and these are the 20 papers we're going to be talking about. That's simply your methodology when writing your collection part of the literature review. And in your methodology, you're going to write exactly that. For tablize, right, here you'll make a table and divide it depending on your topic. So why is this important? This actually helps you know exactly what you're doing as a team. So what I usually tell or do as a team leader, I get them to come into a call. We open a table, whether it's an Excel shared table or even a Word document table, and then we divide, not the work, but the things that we want. So for example, the actual example I want to use is my IGONA study. My IGONA study was simple. Why? Because when I wrote my case study, I knew exactly how I wanted to formulate my review. The review was formulated as the following, and the subtopics were very simple. The first subtopic, and I actually wrote it down here, was what? Symptoms and signs. The second subtopic was investigations. Third subtopic was treatment, and the fourth subtopic was prognosis. The fifth one, by the way, was radiological finding as well, because it had to do with, this is the way to diagnose IGONA aslan. You need a radiological finding. So what I did is I told the team, we're going to have, and we actually had, I think, around 12 case reports. Within the 12 case reports, we're going to extract symptoms and signs, investigations, treatments, and prognosis. So I made a table. Okay, actually, I see if I have a picture for it. This is not the picture for it. This is exactly the page. Okay, here, if you can see in this upper picture right here where I'm circling around, this was the initial table when we extracted the case reports. So here, we just wanted to extract and see how many case reports we had. Eventually, we saw that we had, I think, 16 case reports. We excluded 4 because they did not fit the criteria. Our criteria was to be what? A euthyroid case with negative antibodies. 4 of them, I think, had either positive antibodies or positive thyroid, findings. And then we made it into a table, as you can see here in the Excel sheet. Okay, group took care of what, for example, the risk factors, the age, the gender. Okay, and here, of course, we named the articles in case 1, case 2, case 3, case 4, case 5. We had a total of 12 cases from 13 a total of I think it was 12 cases. Right? And here we have, for example, the signs and symptoms. Of course, if I showed you everything, it would show you everything else. But as you can see, the signs, for example, someone took care of the signs. They put X on every case that had, for example, redness in the eyes, lacrimation, optic atrophy. Only this case had it. Again, this is how you tablize. Okay, you organize. You have an idea of what you want to divide the tables into. How? By doing this initial data collection table, which is you just throw in an article, the database you got it from, and the important points within the article. For example, I like this table more because this one I used it to do my introduction. But in here, for example, this person found the case number 1, which is titled thyroid antibody negative euthyroid graves of thyroidopathy. nice, this article so far, read the discussion, okay? PubMed Central, they got it from PubMed Central, and of course they just briefly told the team about the presentation and ophthalmic examination findings. Here they wrote everything within the article. Why? So the team doesn't go back to the article again. Khalas, we have all the information we needed within this table. Okay, and then when we extrapolated this table to make an Excel sheet, it was very simple. We just read the books that was written by the person, and then we extrapolated the data. Here, this table, for example, I did it on my own. I wanted to write an introduction, a very nice introduction about the topic. Okay, so I made a table putting nearly all the articles I felt would fit my introduction. So, for example, I put this article that talked about clinical course of three thyroids subject with positive TSH receptors. Here, I just talked about the clinical trial of patients with positive TRAB on euthyroid patients getting Graves' disease eventually. So, here, the simple idea I wanted from this article is within my introduction, I'm going to talk about that a lot of those who had positive antibodies eventually got Graves' disease. By the thyroid labs. So why was this important? Is because I was trying to compare positive antibody euthyroid versus negative antibody euthyroid. Again, this is an advanced. When you know the research, you would know, or when you know the topic, you would know what I'm talking about. But again, here I simply looked at the finding and I added it within my introduction. For example, in the second point, in this research about a systematic review of euthyroid Graves' disease, look, if you look specifically here, by the way, you're going to tell me, a review is already done. No, why? Because this is about euthyroid Graves' disease, not euthyroid with negative antibodies Graves' disease. This is actually what it gets interesting when the antibodies are negative. But they did euthyroid, we are doing euthyroid with negative antibody. Okay, and like we went. So it's not the same thing. And this is actually a much more common presentation than being with negative antibodies. So again, this is the whole system that we're doing. Okay, we're making tables, we're adding researches that make sense with what we want to do. Here in this example, we added case reports. Here we added other than case reports. Why? Because I'm adding these researches into my introduction, and my introduction has nothing to do with my actual review. My review is only talking about case reports, and I mentioned it in my methodology. And we only focus on case series and case reports, and that's it. Well, any questions until now? I hope I haven't been talking a lot. And if people did not understand exactly what I'm talking about, please do ask, عشان this is pretty much the bread and butter of what you need in a literature review. So again, collecting, I tableized, now I made tables, everyone is online with my table. Again, the main things about table is to organize your thought so you know how to move forward. Sometimes we do tables and then we rule out. Sometimes we do tables and we rule in. Where is the example of that? In my research about Kahul and Kafistur. Originally, by the way, this research was going to be talking about only about Kahul. Okay, and then we did tables and we realized we have we had like only 10 papers and that's it. And the doctor said, okay, that's not a lot. And how did we know that wasn't a lot? By doing the tables. They said, okay, we add Kafistul onto the review, and we did, and then we got like around 25 papers into the research, and that was good enough. How did we know that we had to add Kafistul into the topic? By doing tables. Simply, it organizes your thought process. It organizes what you need from a research and what you're going to be doing eventually when you write. So that's the main important part. Of course, one last thing about tableizing is it will help you later on make diagrams. So, for example, if you go to my paper about euthyroid Graves' ophthalmopathy, this Excel sheet, pretty much all of it turned into a table in my research. And why are tables important is because that's pretty much your main thing in a literature review. You write written words, but also the tables are so important. A lot of people, or a lot of people who read reviews pretty much just look at the tables, because tables should summarize everything that is written by your own accord. So here, again, if you go to my euthyroid negative antibody article, pretty much everything we wrote in words is written down in tables. So you don't even need to read the paper sometimes. You can just look at the tables and understand what we talked about at that time. Okay. Finally, you write, okay, and how to write a review. And inshallah, I have a section for that, exactly how writing should be done in a literature review. But again, the idea is simply you're going to be writing it as if you're writing an essay. So you're going to be simply introducing and mentioning the information and where you got the information, simply. Okay, so these are again tables. Here is, for example, tables that I've gotten from one of my papers. Here, if you remember, I told you whenever you do a methodology, you should also have a diagram mentioning how you got your papers and how you excluded. So, for example, this was from my Kahwal and Capital paper. We added this much articles in each of these different databases from PubMed, PubMed Central, and Science Direct. And then from these 921 papers, we've removed 908 and we kept 13. Of course, we have never read the 900 papers. We didn't even look at half of them. Okay. But the idea here is the trick. What we did is we got the 13 and then we said, okay, what was the initial number that we should have added? We simply used the keywords we had used in PubMed and PubMed Central and Science Direct to get the 13 papers. And then we just saw the total number of papers that come out in the search button. So I think I could show you this, but if you go to PubMed, write any keyword, you're gonna have, I think it's in the bottom, in the top right corner, it tells you the number of articles found. So this is simply what was the number that we followed, and it's pretty simple. Again, it's not a systematic review, so the methodology was not very strict. If this was a systematic review, I should exactly strictly show you the number that I found, and all the 900 papers should be at least screened by me for it to become a systematic review. Again, this is a narrative review or literature review, if it's not that strict. And 121 papers were seen, 108 was removed, 13 was kept, 4 was then removed on full text review, and we mentioned in the methodology why we removed them, and then we were kept with 9. Yeah, sorry, this is the what's it called? Sorry. This is not the Kahul and Kafistul. This was the euthyroid paper, and again, the euthyroid paper we did the same idea because what I've learned from the Kafistul and Kahul experience, I've pretty much implemented in my euthyroid paper. Of course, here's a table mentioning pretty much all the articles that I've extrapolated and the number of cases from each. And of course, if you can see here, my name is actually there. Why? Because I've cited my own case report into the review itself. So that's also a positive that you can do. Because again, citation is not very important for you as a medical student. Yeah. Here are some tables from my Kahwal and Kafis tool. Again, these tables, they look like this in my research paper, but believe me, they were just a mess bunch done in Word documents with me and my colleagues, and we've done it. Here is another type of diagram that you can do, which is illustrated diagrams that you can add into your paper. Of course, usually the illustrated diagram should be original. It should be your own drawing, your own work, because there's this whole idea of copyright problems that you can get into. So you should just find a specific website that would allow you to do diagrams freely without getting any copyright problems. Because again, other than this paper, which Dr. Wasim knew where to get the diagrams from, I did not know, honestly, the idea behind it. I haven't had any diagrams added into any of my reviews, and there's no need at that time. طبعا this is the what's it called, the diagram that we've put for the methodology for our Kahwal and Kafis tool. Okay, here we mentioned the keywords exactly used in each of the different databases, and these are the numbers we added and how we excluded and what we kept. Of course, again, we did not read all 200 papers. Pretty much it was just the 28 papers we were left with. So again, how to write a literature review. But mainly here, this will depend on your comprehensive comprehensiveness when it comes to writing a paper. But what's the idea here simply is you want to lay out your findings. So you're going to be saying the idea is simply to lay out the information. So my information is such and such from such article. That's simply how it is. I'm going to go into the details in the next slide of how exactly you should write the sentences you write in your literature review. So in the main body of the review, not in your introduction. The introduction does follow a similar system, but again, the introduction is not limited to what you find. It's limited to the literature itself. So, for example, the topic talks about, again, agona, like euthyroid graves of thermopathy with negative antibody. But if you saw my introduction, I've added research that talked about positive antibodies. Why? Because I'm just introducing the topic. I'm introducing that there is something known as euthyroid graves of thermopathy with positive antibodies. But today we're going to be talking about euthyroid graves of thermopathy with negative antibodies. Okay? So that's simply how it is. Okay, so step 1 in writing. But to write a paragraph, there's 2 ways. At least, this is how I organized. You either can write it in a bullet point form or a connecting sentence. So what's bullet point form? It's simply mentioning the information. So For example, in Germany, Killian-Jameson diverticulum is often found in children. But how did I get this piece of information? Most probably, I got it from a German research or publication that mentioned this point. Simple. In Japan, it seems more common in older adults. In Japan, Killian-Jameson is more common in older adults. The German study is likely more accurate because it included a larger group of people. So again, these are three different sentences that are interconnected but written in bullet points. So in Germany, they found that Killian-Jameson was more often in children. In Japan, they've seen it in adults. And Germany is more likely accurate because it included a large group of people. But again, this is what is your own interpolation of the result. You do not need to add it at all. Yani, again, let me actually draw here. Yeah. So this section you don't even need to, you don't need to justify the reason. Sometimes you can justify, and you would see it in some reviews. They would justify. Yeah, okay. I just was told that there are questions in the chat. Inshallah, I'll just read them out in a bit. But again, you don't need to justify justify the findings, but sometimes you would want, especially if it's very clear. Here, it's nicely done. Where the person justified a large group of people is the reason this result is better than this result. Although I mentioned both. Okay. So this is the idea. A connecting sentence would look like this. Although research from Japan suggests that Killian-Jameson diverticulum is more common in older adults, okay, studies from Germany find it more prevalent in children. The German study is more likely reliable because it involved a larger number of participants, meaning it has more power. Simple. So here, it's the same thing. Here, the information I'm conveying is the same information I'm conveying here, but here it's done in a more connected fashion. The English here is just connected together. Here you can just bullet point it. Again, both of them is not wrong. Both of them is done properly right. Let me just read the chat for the questions. Just to make sure, the unis REC may or may not mind us not including faculty. Okay, yeah, oh my God, this is actually something I should have mentioned. This is actually one of the bigger advantages of literature review, is it does not require the REC form. It doesn't require any form of approval, because you're not using any patient data. It's just everything. The data you're getting here is in the internet, is in PubMed, and it's already secure data by other organizations. So you don't need REC forms بالمرة. And when you do it with the doctor, it's just formal agreement, it's verbal agreement, that's it. Could you repeat exactly how you excluded articles without having to read them? So again, Shazia, the way we excluded them is not by, and we didn't actually exclude them. What happened is I searched on PubMed, and then I've just screened the title of all, let's say, all the first 100 searches I found in PubMed. Okay. The first 10 was the ones that I needed. The other 90 has nothing to do with the topic that I talked about. But for some reason, the search button gets them to you in your search. Okay? So I did not, what happened is I excluded them by knowing that it's not part of what I needed just from reading the title. But later on, we wanted to know what the number was. We simply just searched in PubMed, and we saw that the number was a total of 120. We run down through the titles very quickly to make sure that we haven't missed anything specific, and we realized that, okay, that the first 10 was actually the papers that we needed. The other 210 is excluded just by the fact that they have nothing to do with our topic. Although, by searching the keyword, you're getting the 220 papers in your search button or in your search result. So we had to mention it in our methodology. Okay? And let me go back to my paper. I think she sent another thing. Okay, no problem. Good. But that's the step one in bullet points. So step two is how to introduce an article. Of course, if you've seen the step one examples, you've already seen how I introduced it in one way. But these are the different ways we can introduce an article. And by introducing, I mean just introducing the information. So for example, we can use the author's name. We usually use the first author, and maybe that's the reason everyone fights for first authorship, maybe. But usually you should always use the first author's name, okay? Yeah. So this is maskhara. Not to fight for first authorship and whatever. So Smith et al. So this person is called Smith. Usually you mention the last name. So for example, my name is Rashid Abu Helwa, so they're gonna say Abu Helwa et al. If I had my name in a paper as first author. But here I wrote also, like for example, the year of publication, just to have an extra coverage. This is the paper I'm getting it from, because maybe Smith did two papers that I'm adding into my review, and one was done in 2021, the other one was not done, for example, in 2023. So I just want to make sure that person knows there's a difference between them. Okay, so Smith et al. In 2021 explored the prevalence of Killian-James diverticulum in their comprehensive study. So here, how did I introduce this piece of information that they did comprehensive study? I introduced it by mentioning his name, which is Smith et al. Okay, the other way is to do it by country, which was exactly the example I showed you here: Germany, Japan. Okay, so for example, if the study was done in France, I could say a study conducted in France investigating the relationship between Killian-James diverticulum and dietary factors. And then, for example, I can continue and mention the finding. Like, for example, they found that there was a positive correlation between fast food and Killian-James diverticulum being present in these patients. Yeah. The year of publication. Okay, I don't know why this happened. Give me a second. Okay, so the year of publication, for example, here in 2022, in the 2022 article named Management and Outcomes of Killian-James diverticulum, the authors found that surgical intervention significantly improved patient outcomes with a notable decrease in symptoms and recurrence rate compared to conservative management. Again, here, the way we introduce this article is by mentioning the year and also the title. So in number four, I pretty much summarized the thing that you can do is you can mash up whatever you want. You can mash up the year, the country, and the author's name. But don't be extravagant. Don't. And also, of course, by the way, the name of the article, the title of the article. But don't be extravagant. What I mean by that is simply don't mention all four. I usually mention one or two if needed. يعني Smith et al. With the year, France, for example, just one. Here I mentioned the year with the title. So again, mention one or two, and that's it. And that's pretty much your literature review. Your writing is going to be pretty much the study conducted in France, the study conducted by Abu Helwa et al., the study done in 2022, the case report seen by the people in Japan have found out that, etc., etc., etc. Okay, that's it. But here, of course, these are other examples of how we can mention them. So here, Brown and colleagues in 2023 provided a unique perspective by focusing on genetic factors. So here I mentioned the name and the year. In the 2022 case report titled Unusual Presentation of Killian-James diverticulum, here I mentioned what the year and the title. So again, you have multiple ways. Also, you can also mention the hospital name. So, for example, if the article was done in a specific hospital, for example, an article done in Jalila Hospital, so you can mention a review done, or a case report seen in Jalila Hospital in the UAE, mention that, etc., etc., etc. If the hospital name was mentioned in the article itself, okay? But that's it. Sometimes you can also say the number of patients. So, for example, if I did a research on 160 people and you're writing a review about this research, you can say, in the review done in France, where they looked at 160 patients with Killian diverticulum, they saw that, etc., etc., etc. Got it? But this is pretty much what the jawhara of literature review is how you should write it down. And finally, citations. Of course, citations, if you've ever worked with me, I would always suggest to do it in RefWorks. I think your university till this day has free subscription to RefWorks. You can just log in with your university email. Yeah, but this is is different from you mentioning him. You get me? This is not citation, ya Jama'ah. When we introduce the person, it's not citing him. I'm not citing him. The citation is the number that comes in the end of the sentence. So it's like the 1 or the 2 or the 3 that comes in the end. This is what citations are. Okay? So yes, I can cite him by the end of the article, but I have to, like English-wise, I have to tell the person what I'm talking about. So I have to say, I'm talking about this person or that person, or this review or that review. So you get me? This is the idea behind it, or why I mention such and such in such a way. Okay, you got this point? طبعا reports work very well. There's of course multiple AI tools, but the idea simply is what? When citing, okay, when you cite, make sure you organize the citation depending on what you cited first, starting from the introduction, going down all the way to the conclusion. So what I mean by that is citation number 1, or the article number 1 goes to the first thing you cited in introduction. The second thing you cited in introduction is number 2. The third thing you cited, for example, is in your main body of the article is number 3. It just follows this organization. If, for example, you use an article that you spoke about in your introduction, you also use it in your body. If in the introduction it's number 3, in the body it will be number 3 as well. Okay, so make sure you understand how citations and the numbering of citations work. This is again not our topic, so we're not going to be going into depth in it. But Latif is asking, can we cite the author at the end of the sentence? Again, if the English makes it work that way, like for example, I would say a research done, or Killian was seen to be in obese patients more than a non-obese patients, as a research was done, or like as found by Rashid in their paper in 2022. Format عادي, again, if the English allows it in, if you're grammatically correct in it. Again, some words are hard to just pronounce, and grammatically is one of them. Anyways, if your grammar just allows you to say it in such a way, you can do that. But again, when we cite a sentence, so for example, I write, and then I cite it, this has nothing to do with how I wrote my sentence. So again, going back to this example, this is very important. This is not citation. Okay, this is not me citing it. It's just me mentioning the thing or the person who found such and such result. My citation is the number I add at the end of the sentence. Last thing about citation is it depends on where you publish. If you're publishing in certain places, some of them like their citation numbers by the end of the actual sentence. Some of them like it in the middle. Some of them actually like it right after you mention the person. For example, some of them like it right after you mention the management and outcomes of diverticulum, so they like the number to be right here. So again, this is very rare, and usually they don't ask for it. Usually, most of them they ask for it by the end of the sentence. Okay. And remember, sometimes you may cite multiple. Sometimes I could be speaking about multiple research, or I'm talking about Abu Helwa et al. And Smith et al. Here, you will cite both papers in the same sentence. So it's going to look something like that. It's going to look and it's going to look like something like 1, 2. And two things cited at the same time. Sometimes I've cited multiple things, so it's going to be like 1, 2, 6. Like 6 papers were cited in this sentence because I mentioned all 6 findings. Okay, so that is simply how to do a literature review. Was it hard? Honestly, it shouldn't be that hard. It's very simple, very straightforward. If you get yourself or you get working on the literature review and you follow these steps, inshallah, even if you change it a little bit to your liking, and eventually you see how easy literature reviews are done. Pretty much it's just finding papers, reading them, writing about them, and that's it. Yeah. So team dynamics and some advices from me. So this is, again, it's out of the scope of the literature review topic, but why am I talking about it? Is because I've seen a lot of people that find this being a major problem when they write or they do whatever papers and research. But mainly, this is the reason people fight. Okay, everyone wants to become a first author, but not everyone wants to do all the work. Okay, honestly, the way I work it out is the following. Okay, if you're gonna become a first author, I expect you to do most of the work. This is at least how I work it out. Okay, I don't believe in a world where a first author has equal work as a second or third or fourth author. Why? Because genuinely, yes, the first author does benefit the most. Why? Because sometimes some places they do look at a paper and they would grade you highly if you were more for first author in it than if you were not a first author. Okay. And honestly, not a lot of places do that. For example, in BRU, Abu Dhabi, and UAE in general, they don't care. They care more about you having a publication, not that you're a first or a second or a third author. طيب. But again, because of that big advantage that you get as in your name being a first author, you should first of all lead, for sure, you should lead your paper. You should have the most knowledge about it. You should be the most communicative about it. You should always mention, or if the group is sleeping, you should always be the person advocating for people to come back and do the paper again and again. You should be the person also publishing the paper, and you should be the person who does most of the work. So reviewing the work done by everyone else should be done by you. You should have your own work also done. You should most probably write the paper, or combine the paper and fix it according to what the publishers say. You should have the open communication mainly with the doctors that are working with you. I know it's a lot, but again, you are the first author, you are the leader. And believe me, if this is the dynamic that is followed by people, it would cause less of a mess and make everything much better. Because making everyone work equally just means everyone will become first author. And this becomes the second problem that you're going to be facing. So two things are going to be faced. Either a first author that does all the work and then says, why am I doing all the work? Why don't I have a team that does some of the work with me? Right? You should kind of accept that if you're going to become a first author, you should accept that you're going to be doing most of the work. Or you're a first author that says, or a leader that says, "La, I'm going to divide my work equally amongst everyone, عشان everyone does equal work, because everyone is getting a publication in this scenario." But then you're going to get people who are going to mention, "No, la, I deserve first author more than you, because we've done equal work." So the idea here is to balance this out. You should understand, if you're going to become a leader and a first author of a paper, you should accept the fact that you're going to be doing most of the work. At least this is my advice to everyone that works in a research setting, simply. But what I mean by most of the work doesn't mean like 99%. Like, I don't mean that you should write everything, but you should dedicate work to everyone, knowing that the work that you're going to be doing is the major part, and everything that needs fixing is done by you. And that even this should be very important, because when you allocate fixations on other people, those are going to come back and tell you that, well, I fixed kada and kada, and without me, the paper wouldn't have been done. I should be first author. And this becomes a big problem. And if people who lived through this knows how bad it goes, and some publications also don't happen because of this problem. Okay. Second author isn't important, not really. Anything after first author pretty much is the same. Yani second, third, fourth, fifth, last, it doesn't matter. Okay. It doesn't really matter. So this is my only advice. If you disagree, we agree to disagree. Right? But I do believe in that this is the dynamic that always helped a research to move forward, when the leader and the first author knew that they should do the most work. And this is what I followed. In my case report that I've done where I'm first authoring, I've done most of the work. In the paper that I've done where I was third author, I didn't do the methodology, I didn't do the tables, I didn't do the graphs, I didn't do the paper, the outline. All I did was my part, and that's it. Alhamdulillah, we published and everyone's happy. The person who got first author is happy, and I'm happy. Everyone is happy. Okay. Okay. So that is the main thing about team dynamics that I want to mention. طيب, to follow this, صراحة, it does help you a lot when it comes to doing research. My other advice is on publication and their importance in residency. يا جماعة, please, you don't need 20 plus publication to be the number one resident that will come up. This is pretty much شو اسمه, a hoax and a fake thing. Don't follow it. But you need publications. So you need like 1, 2, 3. But why? Because you need to show in your CV that you had research done, or work and research done. But it doesn't mean that you have to do excessive work or do more than enough, or do more than what's needed. But that's 1. 2, do poster presentations, do oral presentations. Don't just focus on publication, also do presentation. This is actually one of the also disadvantages of reviews. You can present it in a conference, but the problem is it's not looked upon. When you present a review, it's not as good as presenting an original research. So this is also one of the cons that I forgot to mention in the slides initially. Q1 and Q2 journals. طيب يا جماعة, this word honestly, I don't want to hear it again from you guys, please. This is not really important for you guys, unless طبعا there's an exception. If you're genuinely thinking of becoming a PhD doctor, you want to earn your PhD, starting early, getting your publications in Q1, Q2 in topics that make sense for you and your PhD that you're aiming for sure, you are correct. But for the most of us who want to become residents, doctors, have their own clinics, please guys, wallahi, Q1, Q2 journals make no sense. The word Q1, Q2 should not be understood by you guys. But what you should focus on is PubMed Index. Yes, this is something I would tell you to focus on. Why? Because MBRU looks for PubMed Indexed articles. US looks for PubMed Index articles. UK looks for PubMed Index articles. Yes, they do focus on this when it comes to a medical student. And guess what? There are Q3s and 4 articles that are PubMed Index. You don't need to limit yourself to Q1, Q2 and be the best of a lot of ish. Okay? Again, to aim high is very good, but sometimes aiming too high eventually makes you not end up with any research or any publications. Finally, my advice to how to get your quickest and most effective publication. Literature reviews is one of the ways, but my number one and always the way that I always mention to everyone that I meet is find a case in one of the hospitals, write it as a case report. Especially if it's a rare case or it's a very difficult case, write it as a case report, publish it into Curious. فورا. Curious is your best friend. Why? 1, it is PubMed indexed. 2, it is pretty cheap compared to other publishers elsewhere. So this is my number one advice for you if you want to actually get the quickest publication. But literature review is also very good, Salah. But again, the reason I'm saying case report usually is because of the MBRU application. You'd want to get that MBRU full marks in research by giving yourself a case report in PubMed. That is PubMed index, يعني. Okay? But that's it. So, any other questions before we finish our nice, quick, easy introduction about reviews. There's a lot of people are writing, so I'll just wait for them. Until then, I will talk about the last section, which will be let's play a game and think of how we would move forward making a literature review. So, thank you, Rashid. Okay, يا جماعة. No problem, يا جماعة. Anytime. Thank you, Mustafa, for your message. Huh? ما شاء الله هذا هلا دخل. أهلين أحمد. He just joined when we finished. But if you guys have any questions, please know that I'm very approachable. Like most of you see me a lot in the university, and I hope I'm not that intimidating because I'm a resident and I'm much older. And you just know I'm very, very, very approachable. Like just get my number from anyone. Most of the people have my number. If you have any questions about reviews and everything, do mention to me and do ask me about them if you'd like. But please do that. If I did not answer your question here or you did not answer. I did not just want to answer a question here, or you want something in private to be talked about, please. So let's play a small game. Give me a topic, يا جماعة. يلا. واحد منكم give me a topic that they feel like would be interesting as a review. Fine? And we're going to talk about the exact steps that I would take as a leader of that specific topic. يلا. Someone give me a topic. Give me a topic.
Maybe nephrotic syndrome.
Tell me no.
Nephrotic.
Nephrotic syndromes?
Yes.
طيب حلو. Nephrotic syndrome is a very nice topic. طيب, because it's a topic in the end. Nephrotic syndrome. طيب, it's just simply a disease within the kidneys. I'm just going to write it down in the chat so people can read it. So, nephrotic syndrome is a very nice, okay? طيب, so nephrotic syndrome is a big topic, and that's the problem. Why is this idea, أول شيء, starting off is a problem is because it's a big major topic. The first thing I would do as a leader, I would tell you, no, let's narrow it down. But what do you want to know about nephrotic syndrome? Do you just want to know everything about it? Well, do you want to know about it in specific? For example, how do we treat nephrotic syndrome? طيب, how do we treat? Does anyone know? So it really depends on the nephrotic syndrome, but sometimes, most of the time, it's steroids. Okay? How do we diagnose? We diagnose with what? With biopsy. We biopsy. Most of them, they usually diagnose with kidney biopsy. صح ولا لا? Yeah. These are, again, things that come up when we talk about nephrotic syndrome. So why don't we do a review about a certain thing? So for example, the effectiveness of biopsy in diagnosing nephrotic syndrome. Does that sound better? Oh my God, sorry, perhaps effectiveness of diagnosing syndrome with biopsy. Hello, again, this is just a topic that I brought from the top of my head. Here, what am I talking about? Talking about, is it a effective thing to do biopsy? Well, do some research now talk about non-biopsy ways of diagnosing nephrotic syndrome. And this would be a nice way of reviewing the literature. And no, heck, this way I'm focusing on specific things about nephrotic syndrome. But is it wrong to talk about nephrotic syndrome as a whole? No, it's not at all wrong to talk about it. Okay, actually, if you write nephrotic syndrome in PubMed, you're going to see someone that already did a review about it, 100%. Even the rarest diseases have a review. صراحة, and Killian has a review. I don't know whatever. And I've always searched about these rare diseases to see if they had a review because I wanted to do one. And they've nearly always had reviews. So for sure, nephrotic syndrome has a review. Okay, and this review would be 20, 30, 40 pages long. So for sure, you're not going to be competing with whatever they wrote. But that's why it's always good as a medical student to narrow down the review. The second thing is just what I mentioned now, is to see if it was done before. This is very important. This is my second thing that I will be doing. Before I mention the topic, I would run it through my head, and then I'll see if it was done before. If it was done before, recently, the most probably I'm not going to be doing it again because I'm not going to be adding a lot of things into the review. But if it was done before like 20 years, 25 years, 1990s, for example, for sure I want to do it again because for sure there will be papers that are new between the time that review is done and the review that I'm going to be doing. Okay? That's simply the second step. The third step is our what? And now we're going to go with our collect, stabilize, and write. Okay, so what am I going to be collecting? So simply I'm going to be collecting researches that talk about the use of biopsy in nephrotic syndrome versus not used. Okay, for example, these are going to be the researches that I'm going to be searching about. What am I going to be limiting myself to? I'm going to be limiting myself to RCTs, case reports, and retrospective and شو كان اسمها الثانية retrospective الثانية يا ربي نسيت اسمها retrospective and the other type of study اللي هي cohorts يعني cohort studies. Okay? Yeah. These are the three types of studies that I'm going to be limiting myself to. Okay? ممتاز. Hello. What year am I going to be limiting myself to? Here يعني you have your imagination to choose the years you want to limit the papers that you want to take from. But usually if I have review that was done in 2002, I would go and say I want to get paper from 2003 to 2026. Why? Because in this way I'm strengthening the reason I'm writing this review. Okay? Hello? Is it becoming clearer? Okay, what databases am I going to use? Usually, for me as Rashid, I always go for PubMed and that's it تقريبا. Okay? So you can go for PubMed, PubMed Central, and Scopus, for example. Okay? The databases. What are the keywords? And this is where it becomes clear of what are we going to become talking about, what we're talking about. So here now we're going to write nephrotic syndrome. The other keyword that I will use is biopsy, investigation of nephrotic syndrome. These are like the three keywords that I would use. Again, these are things that are running through my head very quickly. Usually, to know the exact keywords I should use, I would actually search and see what the keywords usually are written in the literature itself and in the titles usually. So to know exactly what keywords I should be using. Okay. This is, for example, the keyword I'll be using. Does this look like a nice methodology? Yes, it does. All I have to do now is write it in a Word format. Simply, our methodology is we're going to be looking at papers in PubMed Central, and Scopus, spanning from 2003 to 2026. The keywords we use are nephrotic syndrome, biopsy, investigation of nephrotic syndrome, and we limited our research to only look for RCTs, case reports, and cohort studies. But we started off with 220 papers, and then we went down to around 25 papers that fitted the topic that we were searching. Out of the 25 papers, we've seen that only 12 papers talked about biopsies as investigations and non-biopsy ways of investigating as well. We have 12 papers. I can make it into a diagram. How will the diagram look? It will be 220, then become 25, and then become 12. Simple. فده هيك خلصنا the collection part in like literally 5 minutes. Okay, and then we're gonna make a table. Okay, now here this is where the imagination starts formulating. How am I gonna make the table? I can simply make a table where I write all the 12 papers, and then I mention the results. What results? Mainly the results that talk about biopsy versus non-biopsy. Simple. Okay. Or I can tweak it a bit. But how will I know? By reading the literature. But can you see that genuinely now I have an initial table that I'll be drawing out and having the group right around. For example, person number 1 is going to have the first 3 articles. He's going to write and tell me what they talked about biopsy and what they talked about non-biopsy. Did they say that biopsy was better than non-biopsy? Did they say that biopsy has less complications? Look, now I have another thing to add into my table. Complications. Sensitivity versus specificity. For example, what also can we think about when it comes to biopsy? Accessibility, for example. What else? What else? And again, when you read the paper, you know exactly how your table will be compromised. So my table is going to have biopsy versus non-biopsy as a comparison. It's going to have sensitivity and specificity if it's written in the paper. It's going to have complications if it's written also. They talked about the complications of biopsy versus not having a biopsy, and if there's any relation of complication because of the biopsy, and finally the accessibility for patients to biopsy and how it changes their treatment. Of course, that's also another subtopic, change in treatments. Yani, did it change in treatment if I chose to do biopsy versus non-biopsy, or did both of them just take steroids? Are you seeing how it's working out? It's just simply what brainstorming ideas. And again, we did not even touch a single paper yet. When you touch these papers and read them, you will eventually know exactly what you want. Okay. Finally, we're gonna talk about writing. And again, writing, I'm not gonna talk about it a lot. Why? Because this is the practical sense. So it's after you do your tables, you're gonna write. Remember, when you do your tables, you want to change them into what? To diagrams to add into your publication as well. That's simply it. Finally, we will do citation. After that, after we write, we will citate this paper. One last thing, Kaman, I like to do as a table, by the way, but I'm going to actually put that, is I like to do my introductions as tables. In the topic of nephrotic syndrome, I like to do a table mentioning just the general idea of what nephrotic syndrome is and what is the current guidelines on biopsying and what are the known complications of biopsy. And then in my review, that's where I go into depth. But again, I like to do a table of introductions. And what I mean by that is simply when I want to write my introduction, I write the articles that I want to add into my introduction in the table form, and I write every article what I want to write and cite from it in my introduction. That's simply what I meant. And I showed you as an example, which was this one. This one here. Here again, leave this to Rashid. It was me writing an introduction. Here I just laid out the important points that I wanted to add into my literature and into my introduction. And while looking at papers, I wanted to make sure I cover these points exactly. But again, tablize. You'll always get to know what to do. Finally, how to publish this. And I believe this honestly needs its own lecture, its own time to talk about. Curious is your best friend. Very easy, very cheap, very quick. But always try to focus on PubMed indexed journals, please. Okay. Make sure, try your best to get PubMed index journal. Out of my 4 papers, 2 are PubMed index, 2 are not. Again, I have 4 publications. Whenever someone asks me, I have 4 literature review publications. The number sounds good. It's not all PubMed index, but again, as a medical student, you want that number. Again, you don't want non-PubMed index, and you also don't want only PubMed index, because that will eventually limit you to like 1 or 2 papers. Find a mix and match. Again, the idea of publication needs its own person to talk about it. You need someone who's experienced with publication. And for example, I just published like 4 papers. Getting a doctor to talk to you about how to publish would be very good. That's it for my presentation. Any other questions?